attendee room.
I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Is Miguel not coming?
Should we wait? Yeah, that's true. Miguel should be here. I feel like
Yeah, what am I thinking?
Yeah. Unless he said he's not coming.
Something didn't seem right. Let me see if he's in the attendee room. Do not see him there. Unless he's a 912 area code. Don't think that's him. Oh, okay. Sherry, I think we're about ready to begin as soon as Commissioner Guerrero.
Okay,
Chair Thompson, did you want to give him a couple more minutes? Or?
Yeah, I can give him a minute or two.
We actually are already broadcasting, which is fine. Just keep that in mind.
All right, the meeting has not yet been called to order.
Correct.
Calling to order the regular Emeryville Planning Commission meeting of September 24th, 2020. And the time is officially 6:32. And I'm going to read the introductory remarks, which is the COVID announcement. I'd like to state for the record that the meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to the Brown Act, waivers provided under the governor's executive order in response to the COVID-19 state of emergency. During the public health emergency, City Hall is closed to the public. The agenda states that the public may view the meeting that is being live streamed online and on ETV channel 27 and provide comment by submitting an online comment form, which will then be read into the record by staff. The comment form can be accessed by going to our main City of Emeryville website at www.emeryville.org and then navigating to the Planning Commission page. Once there, you will see a link entitled Submit an Online Speaker Card. The public also has the option of participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom and may provide public comment during the meeting using the Raise Your Hand function visible on your screen. Or if you're calling in, press *9. The Zoom call-in information was provided on the posted agenda, and there's a link on the Planning Commission agenda page as well. Okay, so could we have a roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Chafe.
Here.
Commissioner Guerrero.
Here.
Commissioner Keller.
Here.
Commissioner Mendez.
Here.
Commissioner Sohane.
Here.
Vice Chair Young.
Here.
And Chair Thompson.
Here.
All 7 commissioners are present.
Excellent. Thank you, Charlie. I'm going to read Part B now. Now is the time for public comment portion of this meeting. Anyone who wishes to make comments relating to an item not on the agenda should have begun submittal of your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments on the record. If you're participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press *9 and the clerk will call you at the appropriate time. At this time, I'd like to ask the city clerk whether any comments have been received via the online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hands to make audio comments.
We have received one online comment, but I noticed that the person who submitted the comment is also on the Zoom call, Mary Maltzby Jeffrey. So I don't know whether we want to inquire whether she'd like to make her comment in person.
I believe that is a comment on item 8.1, is it not? Is that the one that came in earlier?
ECAP is the subject line.
Yeah, I think that is.
That's on the agenda.
That's on item 8.1.
Okay, I beg your pardon then. Never mind.
Okay. So yeah, this is the portion where anything that's not on the agenda is for public comment.
Okay, then we have none that I see yet.
And I don't see any either.
Okay. All right, well, I'm going to officially call it that hearing no additional requests to make comments, the public comment portion of this meeting is now closed. You'll have an opportunity to address and speak on matters that are listed on the agenda when those respective items come up. Okay. So next we have the approval of the action minutes of August 27th, 2020. Are there any commissioner comments? Someone like to make a motion to approve them?
Make a motion for approval.
I can second it.
Right? On the motion, Commissioner Chafe,
Aye.
Commissioner Guerrero,
Aye.
Commissioner Keller,
Aye.
Commissioner Mendez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sohani. Commissioner Sohani?
He's on mute.
Sorry about that. Was a question posted to me?
It's the action minutes, approval of the action minutes. We're taking.
Oh, yeah. Aye.
Vice Chair Young
Aye.
and Chair Thompson.
Aye.
7 ayes. The minutes are approved. Thank you.
So I'd like to move on to the Community Development Director's report, and I'm going to go on mute because I have a train in the background.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Thompson. So this is my report to you on recent actions by the City Council and other news. The Council has held 2 meetings since your last meeting, and those Council meetings were on September 1st and September 15th. On September 1st, the Council held a study session on the San Pablo affordable apartments, reviewing a 90-unit, 100% affordable housing project by RCD at 3600 San Pablo Avenue, on which you will be holding your second study session tonight in a few minutes. And I believe the Council comments will be summarized during that presentation. The Council also considered the Emeryville Art Center project, which I'm sure you recall you all approved unanimously at your last meeting. They were considering what's called a Lease Disposition and Development Agreement, or LDDA. They did move my planning director's report up to the beginning of the meeting, which normally comes at the end of the meeting, so that they could determine whether or not they wish to appeal that project to themselves. And during my report, a majority of the Council did indicate that they wish to appeal the Commission's decision regarding removal of the street trees on Hollis Street. However, they decided not to appeal it because they wanted to keep the project moving forward. So the project was not appealed. Your decision of August 27th approving the Art Center project is now final because the appeal deadline has passed. The Council then went ahead and approved the Lease Disposition and Development Agreement. That is an ordinance, so they approved the first reading of the ordinance approving the LDDA and the related ground lease for the project. The second reading of that ordinance occurred on September 15th, and it will take effect 30 days after that on October 15th. The Council also approved a contract with MAC 5 for construction monitoring of the Art Center project. The Council unanimously approved the first reading of an ordinance amending the planning regulations to allow cannabis manufacturing businesses in additional zoning districts and to allow reduced distances between cannabis sale activities and parks, greenways, and other sensitive uses. Second reading of that ordinance occurred on September 15th, and it will take effect on October 15th. You may recall that the Commission had recommended approval of this ordinance at your June 25th meeting. And then the Council approved an application for an active transportation program, or ATP grant, for design of the bicycle and pedestrian portions of the 40th and San Pablo Bus Hub project. Then on September 15th, the Council approved a contract with Lexington Planning LLC to prepare objective standards and development standards, objective design and development standards to be used in the processing of projects for which state law mandates ministerial approval. And the council held their public hearing on the 47th Street's Homes project. As you know, this is a proposal to demolish 4 existing single-unit homes and replace them with 3 duplexes at 1034 to 1042 47th Street. After closing the public hearing, the council asked staff for the date when the project was deemed complete, and staff was unable to provide that information immediately. So the council continued the item to the next meeting on October 6th with direction to staff to provide the date that the application was deemed complete. So that hearing will be reopened on October 6th, and we will know the council's decision on this project after that. As the commission may recall, at your June 25th meeting, you passed a motion recommending that the city council deny this application. And finally, in other news, I just want to note that the show must go on. Despite the pandemic and the shelter-in-place order, the annual Emeryville Celebration of the Arts exhibition will go on, virtually, that is. And there will be an opening reception via Zoom at its regular time. That will be on Friday, October 2nd, starting at 6 p.m. And you can register, as I have already done, at www.emeryarts.org. And I hope to see you all there. That concludes my report. I'd be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you, Charlie. Are there any questions from the commissioners? Okay, well then I'm going to move forward to the commission matters, the consideration of the Planning Commission meeting schedule for 2021. Are there any comments on that? Okay, would someone?
You mean, sorry, Chair
Sorry.
Thompson, I think you mean public comment, right?
Yeah, if that's the procedure at this time. I wasn't sure if this item had public comment involved in it, but I guess if it does, yes.
It's on the agenda.
Pretty much everything is subject
Okay.
to that. I do not see any raised hands. And let me check my email. I don't see any speaker cards. Sherry, do you have any speaker cards on this item?
I do not.
Okay. I can share the calendar if you want to see it, or you can just go ahead and approve it if you wish.
Would anyone like to see it?
Doesn't sound like it. Okay. Can we get a motion and a second then?
I'll make the
I'll
motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, that was Commissioner Keller. Who was the second? I'm sorry. Commissioner Guerrero. All right, so to approve the calendar for 2021, Commissioner Chafe,
Aye.
Commissioner Guerrero,
Aye.
Commissioner Keller,
Aye.
Commissioner Mendez,
Aye.
Commissioner Sohane,
Aye.
Vice Chair Young,
Aye.
Chair Thompson.
Aye.
7 ayes, the calendar is approved. Thank you very much.
Okay. This is the portion of the meeting where we do the disclosures of ex parte communications, and then note if there are any conflicts of interest. As we discussed last time, we also have to indicate the conflict of interest before the agenda item, but this is the time just to note if there are any.
I have an ex parte communication.
Great.
For item 8.1, in June, I attended a public meeting. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Mendez. Commissioner Guerrero?
It's been so long, but I went to the same meeting.
Okay, well, then hearing no others, I'm going to move us on to the study session, which is for the San Pablo Affordable Apartments.
And
Is there a staff presentation at this time?
yes, Navarre Oaks will be making the staff presentation, and they, I believe, will be sharing their screen to show the PowerPoint. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Yay.
Good evening, Chair Thomas. Good evening, commissioners. Just setting this up real quick for you here. Is that showing correctly for everybody?
I just see your file explorer. Don't see the presentation.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, I'm not getting the presentation either.
What are you seeing?
I'm seeing your files.
Your list of files.
That's
Internet.
not helpful. Let me try that again. My apologies. Well, this was all queued up. Let's try this again.
There.
How about now?
Yeah.
Good. Yay,
Yep,
that
we
makes
can
me
see it.
very happy. Okay. There we go. All right, so as mentioned, I'll be presenting on the 3600 San Paulo Avenue affordable housing proposal this evening. So here is the site. There's 3 parcels altogether between 36 to the south, 37th to the north, and San Pablo to the west. Here's some street views of that. So you see San Pablo Avenue at the top there and intersection of San Pablo at 36 on the bottom view. And here's what's proposed. So same intersection there. So for project background, the city unsuccessfully tried to acquire the property for affordable housing for several years. And in May 2017, the Planning Commission and City Council held study sessions, both supportive of having housing here for formerly homeless individuals and keeping ECAP at this location. The property eventually foreclosed and was obtained by the nonprofit affordable housing developer, RCD. So RCD also owns other projects in Emeryville, and in 2019, the council approved a pre-development loan agreement and housing agreement to provide $2 million towards RCD's site acquisition. So for this project, this is a planning approval under SB 35, which mandates ministerial approval, and AB 1763, which specifies no density limit for projects within half-mile of transit. We'll talk about that briefly a little bit more. And normally includes any planning commission or city council review, but as part of that loan agreement, we have several meetings involved. So there's those meetings, one community meeting, which was already mentioned by some of the commissioners, held in June, 2 planning commission study sessions. This is the second one. I'm sorry. Okay, I'm gonna carry on then. And also the agreement provides the developers to make a good faith effort to address community concerns and comments. So at your last planning commission study session back in May, there were questions regarding the commission's role. And so that was clarified how this works under SB 35 and AB 1763. The commission doesn't have discretion, but your feedback's invaluable, important, and helps to shape the project, as we'll see this evening. And the commission was generally very supportive of the project. And the commission praised the project team for incorporating art as a gateway feature per the general plan and design guidelines. So there was a strong recommendation for more open space, noting that there's a lack of neighborhood open space nearby, and provided suggestions for different building finishes and architectural features. There was a community meeting held in June that was organized by the applicant and held via Zoom. About 35 people attended that, and that discussion covered the amount of parking provided, affordability of the project, coordination with other local planning processes, funding sources, and for the project timeline. And generally, there was support for the project and the design of the project. So pardon me, that was a stutter. The plans have been revised and addressed some of the Planning Commission comments. So for adding open space, a roof deck or balconies were found to be financially infeasible. However, they did add a little bit of square footage to the common open space on the podium level. They also were not able to relocate the 3-bedroom units to add balconies to the 37th Street side, and that has to do with site and building constraints. For building finishes, the applicant did change the dominant color of the building from white to gray in response to the Planning Commission suggestions. So since your last review, the floor area has increased by about 5,000 square feet, and the lot coverage has decreased by a very small amount. Open space, as I just mentioned, has increased by just over 100 square feet, and the number of studios has been reduced by 1, but the number of 1-bedrooms has been increased by 1. The ground floor retail space also has decreased slightly, and this allows for more space for discard, storage, and other utility things, basically making the building functional on the first floor. So additionally, vehicular parking has been modified. The spaces have been reduced to allow more accessible parking spaces. Short-term bicycle parking spaces have been decreased by 1 space for a total of 6 spaces, while long-term bicycle parking spaces have been increased. And unit plans are now provided. That level of detail was not there before. And project details in general are included now. So materials, information, landscaping, courtyard plans, parking details, all these are now included. So the City Council held their study session in September 1st. And there were questions about the ECAP space and really wanting to make sure the design of the project really met ECAP's needs. As a result of that, there was a meeting held last week with staff members, city staff, with the developers, and with ECAP to go over potential needs that ECAP needed to have addressed. So that is being addressed. The courtyard tree selection, there is just a point that they need to consider the orientation of the sun because it's open towards the east, so there's not a lot of sun getting into the courtyard. And then bicycle parking was discussed. There was a request for limiting vertical racks, making sure that they were more accessible by having more horizontal racks, ensuring that the elevator size accommodates larger bikes, so like cargo bikes, trikes, things like that. And there was a suggestion that the walls of the bicycle parking that face the management office be made of glass or be visually permeable to add a layer of security to the project. It should be noted that the vertical racks are limited to 14 out of about 90, so it's not the majority of racks, and that the vertical racks allow for more parking spaces of larger bicycles, so cargo bikes and other non-standard bicycle sizes such as recumbents. The City Council also inquired about the project feasibility of being an all-electric building and inquired as to whether there could be additional safety measures for pedestrians on 36th Street. That had to do with where the jurisdictional boundaries are for Emeryville. And we discussed that staff had looked into that extensively, and the additional landscaping along the 36th Street side is about what we can do at this point because the rest of the project area is in Oakland, not Emeryville. Not project area, pardon me, the street. The rest of the 36th Street is in Oakland. So there was questions about EV parking feasibility for vehicular parking lifts, and there has been an attachment added to this Planning Commission packet tonight to go into some detail on that. And while the Planning Commission emphasized a need for additional open space, the City Council was satisfied with the applicant's response. The additional open space was not feasible. And so of note, there have been no changes that have been made to the plans since City Council review. So you're seeing the same plans tonight that the City Council saw. So the timeline, here we are at the second Planning Commission study session, and the project needs to be approved for SB 35 within 90 days. So we discussed in depth the SB 35 process last time. So just as a reminder though, it is a ministerial project, which means no judgment is involved. It has to be objective. There are no findings, no conditions of approval may be imposed. So all analysis is yes or no of the project compliance with development standards. And if the project complies with the standards, it's approved. If it doesn't, it's not approved. The staff needs to provide a letter saying what changes need to be made in order to make it approvable. And this process is a zoning compliance form, and it's as opposed to design review and use permits, which is what Planning Commission typically sees. So most of the city's design review guidelines and criteria are subjective, so that require some degree of personal judgment. So staff is reviewing this to go over objective standards that are within that. And there's also a form or document rather that the applicant has provided that discusses their interpretation of objective design review standards. So for the super density bonus law, for projects within half mile of a major transit stop, the city may not impose any maximum density. That's all of Emeryville, and projects eligible for incentives or concessions are located also within half mile of a major transit stop, and you can receive a height increase of up to 33 feet. So the applicant may also request unlimited number of waivers of development standards. So we'll talk about that in a second. So an incentive or concession focuses on cost and cost feasibility of the project, whereas a waiver focuses on physical limitations. So the applicant can request concessions and waivers for the project. So for project overview, the project is to demolish all of the existing structures on the existing parcels and build one 7-story building with 90 affordable residential units with one manager's unit. and a minimum of 3,600 square feet of commercial space for ECAP. Right now, they're proposing about 4,600 square feet, and they're proposing 37 vehicular parking spaces, most of which are in lifts, except for the accessible spaces, and bike parking for 93 long-term spaces and 6 short-term. And this says stormwater treatment along 36th Street, but that's incorrect. Previously, it was stormwater treatment along 36th. That's been moved to the east side of the property, and the landscaping along 36th Street remains, but it's not for stormwater treatment. Here's an overview of the site there. This is looking down over the freeway. Here's the ground floor first plan here. You can see at the bottom of the screen is where San Pablo Avenue is. 36th Street is to the right side of the screen, and 37th is to the left side of the screen. So the retail area for ECAP is along the San Pablo frontage. Entrances to the residential are on 36th Street side, that's the lobby. And then on the 37th Street is where the functionality that supports the other uses of the building is. So the parking, the transformers, electrical, and discards. So that'd be trash, compost, and recycling. The podium level holds the bike parking, the manager's unit, and maintenance office areas, as well as other mechanical spaces and mezzanines proposed for the ECAP offices on. So the first floor of the residential, so the podium floor level, contains the courtyard facing east. So that would be the common open space, and that's surrounded by community amenities, like such as a lounge and laundry, and all the units face the exterior to the street. And then above that, levels 2 through 5 are all residential. Unit plans, I know cannot be seen very well here, but what this is showing is that there's multiple units for both studios, for 1 bedrooms, and there's also 2 and 3 bedroom plans. Landscaping site plan has been provided, and it's compliant with our WELO. That would be our water efficient landscaping ordinance. So it's compliant with that. So for off-street loading, there's a requirement that there be off-street loading, but that is not feasible on the site. So the applicant is requesting that it be on street. What this is showing, I know there's a lot of images here, at the upper left-hand corner is showing the parking for vehicles, and so lifts, and then accessible parking spaces. Below that is showing that there would be on-street loading. In the center, it's showing bicycle parking that's located on the mezzanine, which we just talked about. And then to the right side there is showing that different bicycle types can be accommodated in portions of the bike parking room. So as we talked about a few moments ago, non-standard bicycles can be parked in here. So here's that loading we talked about. So entrances on 37th Street to get into the parking garage, and then the loading close to the ECAP entrance. There's a loading door and roll-up door to help facilitate. And then here is the curb extension on the 36th Street side. So if we go here, you can see on the left, it's what it looks like right now. If you overlay where the landscaping will go, it's basically where the parking aisle is and where the driveway entrances are. And then on the right there, you'll see that is showing the landscaping in context with the widened sidewalk. So this will help buffer pedestrians from the high traffic volumes on 36. And here is the building with that new gray color as suggested by Planning Commission. And it also shows the art element as well. I think that here's a rendering from dusk facing the freeway. So this is south facing on San Pablo and 37th in the foreground. There you go, both sides of the building from 37th on the left side and 36 on the right. And a night rendering from 36, from San Pablo at the corner of 36, showing ECAP's ground floor. And then from the freeway, so as you're driving by. This is compliant with the general plan and land use classifications of mixed use residential and a neighborhood retail overlay. The floor area ratio is exceeded, as we talked about, because of SB 35, as is the building height. And the residential density is also at 240 dwelling units per acre. So let's see here, project overview for the unit mix. they're asking that there also be a waiver for unit mix because of the affordable housing. They're targeting people who don't necessarily need large units and can fit more units on the project site this way. There's no setbacks required here. The open space, also a waiver is requested for, and the landscaping complies when we include the landscaping along 36th Street. So for courts, the court area also is something that does not comply, and that is something that also requires a waiver under the state density bonus law. And that has to do with the specific design regulations of where windows can be located for court. So for vehicular parking, we talked about that already. EV parking needs to be provided per city regulations. There's no parking minimums, and it's well under the maximum. Yeah, sorry about that. And the bicycle parking we also already discussed. I apologize for switching back and forth. So for loading, we also talked about that the loading is proposed to be on street as opposed to on site because of the limited site constraints. And it can be considered either a modification or a waiver, either way. For public art, it's only applicable for projects subject to discretionary design review, which this project is not. So there's not a public art requirement, or the applicant has incorporated public art into, or incorporated art into this as a gateway site under the general plan. And the project is exempt from environmental review, so there's no CEQA. Staff reviewed this project back in April and made several suggestions about parking, loading, stormwater, and all of those have been addressed through design revisions. So tonight for your consideration, does the commission have any feedback regarding the overall project? And is the commission satisfied with the applicant's responses to issues raised at the first study session? The applicant also has a presentation for you tonight. And that's that. Thank you.
Thank you, Navar. At this point, I believe I should probably unmute, or not unmute, but elevate to panelists, the applicants presenters.
Are we going to do any staff questions first?
I'm sorry, jumping the gun here.
So I think I wanted to ask the commissioners if they have any questions for Navar at this time. Commissioner Keller?
Just quickly, and she may want to ask this of the, we may want to ask it of the developer, but I noticed in the lobby, elevator lobby, there's two sizes of elevators. So is there a standard passenger elevator, and the other one, is it what would be a service elevator, a larger size?
I definitely think you should ask the applicant about what their intention for those two different sizes is. That did come up. I mentioned it very briefly in the presentation of if bicycles that were non-standard, if they're going to provide parking spaces for those on the mezzanine, will the elevators accommodate for those larger bicycles also? So the applicant can address that.
Okay, yeah, that's what I asked during their first presentation, and it looked like that's what they did, but I'll ask them. Thanks. That's all I have.
Okay. Vice Chair Young, you have a question?
Yeah. Hi. I just wanted to ask Navar what was a little bit more about that waiver on the housing mix. You said that they're trying to opt for smaller units. You kind of glossed over it kind of quick. Can you kind of go over that again?
Yeah, I think that's also a good question for the applicant to talk about why they're choosing the unit mix they are. But probably as you're familiar, Emeryville has unit mix requirements for multi-unit developments, and they're not opting to stick to those unit mix requirements. So that is something that under SB 35, that requirement can be waived.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that provide some clarity?
It does. I didn't know it could be waived. Since it was kind of a yes or no question, and all of a sudden you go back and say it's technically can be waived. I mean, it would just seem like two directions pulling against each other. I
see. So if I understand what the question is, correct me if I'm going down the wrong path here. What's yes or no, what's objective is, does it meet basic design standards, So something for to be an example would be setbacks, right? If there's a required setback, which there isn't in this case, but if there were, if it said the setbacks need to be 3 feet, well, does it meet it? Yes or no? That's an objective standard. And then also under these regulations, you can say under SB 35, you can say, I need a waiver for that because there's something about it that makes either the project infeasible for some reason, because there's waivers and concessions, but basically it's either has to be financially infeasible, it makes the project not buildable at that density, or there's something about the site design that would impede the development. So that's what waivers and concessions are for. So that's separate from objective standards.
That answers the question. Thank you. Okay, great.
Yay. Okay,
Yeah,
good.
Okay.
All right, Commissioner Guerrero.
Thank you, Chair Thompson. My question relates to the mix of different AMI levels for the unit mix. I saw something in the beginning part of the report, staff report that spoke to that, but it's not clear to me like what the actual mix is that's being proposed. Is that something that you're able to answer, Navar?
I would again direct you to the applicant on that, because that's a financial aspect of the project also.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Is there anyone else before I ask my questions who I missed? Okay. Yeah, Navar, a quick question for you about a couple items that are unknown or not provided in full detail. The question about the artwork, it indicated in the staff report that would be, the details of that would be known later. It also noted that for the short-term bike parking, as well as the street trees. And I just wondered, like, what's the process in terms of when that's known and how it gets part of the project? Because if those three things weren't part of the project, it would be a pretty different project.
Right. So the bike parking complies with the requirements, but it could be adjusted still. The street trees are dependent on a photometric survey that needs to be done for street lights. So there's a trade-off in space there, right? You have to have adequate street lighting. And so that could reduce the number of street trees. So a photometric survey will be required. And if more street lights need to go in, that would reduce the number of street trees. So that hasn't been determined yet because a photometric survey hasn't been done at this point.
Okay, and then the artwork?
The artwork, I think what we were saying by that is there's not like a specific artist at this time, and that's not part of a design review process, which, you know, that's separate. So.
Okay.
Let me just elaborate a little bit on the artwork.
Thank you, Charlie.
Even if this project were subject to the city's public art requirement, which as Navar indicated, it's not, that entails the applicant either paying a fee, an in lieu fee, which is calculated based on a percent of construction valuation, 0.5%, I believe it is for residential, or providing artwork that is equal to that amount, that is worth that amount. The actual, and if the applicant chooses to just pay the money, then we just take the money. If the applicant chooses to provide the artwork, the city has no approval authority over the actual artwork. The applicant can do anything they want in terms of public art. It just needs to be by a bona fide artist, which has some kind of a definition, and it has to be valued at the amount that the public art fee, says, 0.5% of the valuation of the project. Our public art coordinator, who is Amber Evans in the Economic Development and Housing Division, she reviews it, and basically she reviews the contract to make sure it's for enough money and that it is by a bona fide artist. Other than that, we have no approval authority over what the art is or what it looks like.
Okay, great. Thanks for the explanation. Another question I had about and this was just understanding the process a little bit, and Navar, you can probably maybe elaborate on this, is there was a note about the waivers versus the conditions, and one can be 4 and then one can be as many as needed. Can you provide any clarity around the amounts in that process piece of waivers and conditions?
It's concessions.
Concessions.
Waivers or concessions.
Waivers and concessions.
You want me to take a cut at that, Navar?
Sure, it sounded like you were jumping on that. I won't hold you back, Charlie.
Well, okay. Concessions, under the state density bonus law, developers can have varying numbers of concessions depending on the characteristics of the project. In this particular situation, they are allowed to have up to 4 concessions. They are also allowed to have an unlimited number of waivers. And the law is not real crystal clear on what the difference is between a concession and a waiver. But if you read it, I mean, it says that a concession has to do with economic viability of the project. A concession is something that they need in order to make this affordable housing project economically feasible. And they can have 4 of those. The waiver is something that relates to the physical feasibility of the project. And if they would, for example, need that waiver in order to be able to get as many units on the site as what the law would allow, which in this case is unlimited. But an example, say, of a waiver might be the open space requirement, where they would argue that if we have to provide all of the open space that the code requires, it's going to reduce the number of units we'll be able to fit on the site, because we'll have to make the courtyard larger, and we'd have to reduce the size of the units by the size of the balconies, things like that. So these are physical things that would reduce the number of units they could have. So for that, they could have what's called a waiver. The unit mix might be something where they would say that, well, if we have to provide 35% 2-bedroom and 15% 3-bedroom units, it's going to make the project cost a lot more, and that's going to affect the viability of it. So that would be a concession, where they're looking for something that relates to financial feasibility. Now, a lot of these issues, it's a little bit of both. Some of, you could argue that the open space relates to both the number of units they can get on the site and the financial feasibility. I don't really know how to slice that, other than to say, well, if it relates to the number of units they can get on the site in any way, then it could be considered a waiver, and they can have an unlimited number of those. I would say the things that they can have 4 of, the concessions, are those things that only relate to economic viability. So how you sort them out is tricky. Frankly, this law is not real well thought through. It's not real crystal how that works.
Okay, yeah, no, that's actually why I wanted the explanation, because it's sort of new to everybody and wasn't quite clear in the write-up, but that may be the law itself. All right, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. I think this is the time for the applicant presentation. Invite the applicant forward.
Okay, I'm
On the Zoom.
going to elevate several people to presenter. Let's see, we have Nick Kramer, who is with RCD. We have Ron Metzger, who is architect. We have Alex Marchese, who is with Roads Planning. We have Carol Buchart, who's with RCD. And then we have Chris Kelly. I do not see Chris Kelly on the attendee list unless he is area code 912.
I think he wound up being having a conflict, so I don't think he's here.
Okay, so I have now elevated all of those folks to panelist status, which means they should be able to be seen and share their screens. Oh, actually, Navar will be sharing their screen to show the applicant presentation. So who's going to be doing the presentation?
I'm going to start. Nick from RCD. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, and you can tell Navar when you're ready to advance your slides, and they will advance them for you.
Great. Well, thank you, Navar, for that really great and thorough overview of the project. Good evening, planning commissioners. My name is Nick Cranmer. I'm a project manager with Resources for Community Development, and we're here this evening to just share some updates on our the proposed project at 3600 San Pablo. So I'm also joined this evening by Carolyn Bookhart, RCD's Director of Real Estate Development, Ron Metzger from LPAS, the architecture team, as well as Alex Marcusi from Roads Planning. So we can go to the next slide, please. So I just want to provide a brief overview of RCD. I know some of you are already familiar, but for the benefit of some community members that may not be as familiar, RCD is a nonprofit whose mission is to address the need for affordable housing by providing high quality, sustainable housing to families and neighborhoods most in need. RCD was founded by Berkeley community members back in 1984, and over the last 36 years, RCD has grown to become a regional affordable housing developer and owner, now housing over 5,000 residents and 60 properties throughout the Bay Area. And RCD's mission includes a commitment to households with residents who have been homeless or at risk of homelessness, people living with disabilities and special needs, as well as the elderly. Go to the next slide, please. So RCD builds and owns its apartment buildings for the long term. We pride ourselves on being good neighbors in the communities where we build and have strong operations teams that consist of asset management and resident services. We also have a community development department, which focuses on capacity building in the communities where we build our housing, helping to cultivate community leaders so that our work has a deeper and sustained impact on the quality of lives of not only our residents, but also the broader community. Go to the next slide, please. So RCD owns 3 other properties, as Navarre mentioned, in the city of Emeryville, including the Ambassador, Bay Bridge, which is adjacent to this site, and the Triangle Court Apartments. Next slide. So RCD contracts with the John Stewart Company for property management at all of our properties. The John Stewart Company has been a property manager for RCD for nearly 20 years, and they manage a wide variety of properties throughout the state, including market rate residential, as well as mixed use buildings. And they're also the largest private manager of supportive housing and special needs housing in California. The next slide, please. So RCD has an in-house resident services team. We contract also with third parties for mental and behavioral health services. And our philosophy on providing services is that services are offered to all residents, not just special needs households, to ensure housing retention and economic stability. So next slide, please. So I think this slide should address the planning commissioner's question on the breakdown of the AMIs. So 22 units will be for formerly homeless households. 25% of units will be reserved for extremely low income households with incomes not exceeding 27,400. 32% of the units will be reserved for very low income households with incomes ranging from about 46,000 to about 68,000 a year, within the balance of units reserved for low income households with incomes ranging from 59,000 to about 81,500. Go to the next slide, please. So before LPS provides a design overview, I just want to provide a brief summary of a recent design coordination meeting between RCD, ECAP, and city staff from housing and planning departments. So this meeting was part of ongoing coordination between RCD and ECAP on the commercial space planning, and was in response to some questions that were raised by city council members at the city council hearing. One of the items that was highlighted by city council was the need to create a better connection between the ground floor and second floor ECAP spaces. And so Ron from LPAS will highlight some of the alternatives that we're looking at. And this is just something that we will continue to kind of explore and refine during design development. Another item that was identified by city council was space planning for refrigeration needs, including walk-in refrigerators, as well as the need to kind of gain a better understanding of how folks will move through the space. So ECAP has secured the assistance of a few architects to help them diagram and clarify the program needs. And so this is again something that will be refined during the design development process. We're also working with ECAP on their daytime parking needs. ECAP has a secure offsite location for the parking of their box truck, but need a location to park during the daytime. So we're working with them to identify where we can accommodate their box truck during tea time hours, either on or off site, or even potentially maybe, at Bay Bridge or something like that. So, and lastly, we discussed temporary relocation of ECAP during construction. This was a question that came up at the city council hearing. Currently, relocation isn't anticipated for about 2 years. So we haven't yet identified a temporary space for ECAP, but we're continuing to work with ECAP on their relocation needs. Go to the next slide, please. So it's just a brief overview of the timeline of the project. Since we last met with the Planning Commission, we held a community meeting. We submitted our formal planning application to the city and attended a city council study session. As Navarre mentioned, SB 35 approval is required by October 20th. And then once we have our entitlements for the project, we'll spend the next year and a half securing local funding from the city, the county, as well as state funding. And once we have all that funding lined up, we can start construction, which we anticipate in summer 2022, with construction finishing sometime, I think, in spring 2024, and lease up happening in summer 2024. So I'm going to hand it off to Ron at LPS to kind of highlight some of the changes to the project since we last met.
Okay, great. So as Navarre mentioned, this shows where the project is, so we can go to the next slide. So currently we are looking at updating the sidewalk, getting rid of the curb cuts that currently exist along San Pablo and 36th Street, and making it a walkable sidewalk with tree grates and special paving for the San Pablo Avenue plan. And we're adding street trees consistent with that. And as Navarre mentioned, we have bulbed out the walkway there at 36th Street to create a little bit shorter walk for people coming from the west, or from the south rather. And we have created a landscape buffer between the front of the building where the residential entry is and the sidewalk. We can go to the next slide. So this is the ground floor. And so the lobby for the residential is off of 36th Street. You do see that we have two sizes of elevator. The normal passenger elevator that would be gurney capable is on the left. The deeper, larger freight size elevator to accommodate larger bikes is on the right. So that's what we're anticipating there. And we also have mail and parcels in the middle. Then there's a lot of things that are trying to be accommodated on the ground floor. We have most of our services coming off of 37th Street. So we have fire pump, which needs direct access to the street. We have our garage entrance off of 37th Street because, as you all know, 36th Street is a very impacted street. And in early pre-app meetings, it was strongly encouraged that there should be no access off of 36th Street. So previously, we also had our transformer. We had recessed the building and tried to fit our transformer in between the building and the public way, because it is our understanding that transformers cannot be in the public way. And so that became problematic for a variety of reasons. And so what we have done here is we've incorporated the transformer inside the building, as you see here. And then our electrical room also needs to be have exterior access. And so we have that adjacent. So and then we have our trash for ECAP right behind it, and then residential trash behind that, with access off the main garage, and then bulk storage for art packages, recycling, and whatnot, also off the main garage. So trash will be taken out of the garage and staged in the loading area on trash day for pickup. We are currently working on and trying to coordinate with electrical engineering and utilities and the city's public works on all of those areas to see if we can make some of this area more efficient to free up more room for ECAP. As Nick mentioned, we had a kickoff meeting with ECAP and multiple design teams to start programming their space in more detail. I mean, generally speaking, services of goods comes into ECAP from 37th Street from the loading. So the back of house here, sorting, prep, and all of that happens here. So refrigerators would probably be up against electrical rooms, etc. And then trash and recycling come out and then out the garage. The clients for ECAP would be coming from San Pablo and circulating more towards the south. And it would likely have a couple of doors. There is about a foot grade difference between 37th and 38th Street, or 36th and 37th Street rather. And so we need to look and see how best to accommodate that. Somewhere we need to be able to accommodate a ramp. So we believe right now we have a pretty flexible open space, but we will be coordinating and adding all of that kind of more detailed information. If we go to the next slide, as we were going through kind of the design process, we thought, even though 3,600 square feet was the minimum, we felt that we really should have more. We thought, why not put some offices and other kind of support spaces up on the second floor? Since we are already building a second floor, let's accommodate that. Now, in this plan, we were proposing to be able to use the elevator and stair that were part of the housing project for access to the ECAP. Through our meetings, that's not really the ideal situation and is not as functional as it should be. And so it's likely we will be looking at putting a stair between and a lift between any kind of upstairs functions and the downstairs functions for ECAP. But this extra space, and it's probably not right here, it'll be, we want to make sure that the high volume space, particularly in the more retail function of the use is not impacted. So maybe over some of the support spaces, we'll kind of reconfigure that to accommodate the program. I guess we can go to the next slide. So the first two floors, actually go down, if we could go back one more, I apologize. So in addition to the ECAP space along San Pablo, it was mentioned that we have our bike room right off the elevators. And so the idea, even though at the moment we're showing this as a dark line, this would have a lot of transparency with glass so people can see in here. It'll be fobbed, so it will be secure. There'll be cameras on this space so that there'll be records of who comes in, who comes out, both in terms of the fob door and in terms of the cameras. We have the manager's unit here, but also maintenance and support offices for the operations of the building. On the upstairs, on the 37th side, we have additional utility space because we cannot fit everything on the ground floor. And so I would imagine boilers and things like that would be in that area. So now we can go up. So on the main level, so now we're on top of the concrete structure. So everything below this was done in type 1 concrete. Now we're into wood frame type 3 construction. As Navarra mentioned, we did push the building out towards 37th Street to make the courtyard a little bit bigger. We also, at the same time, pulled the building away from the east property line. Previously, it was pretty much right up against the property line. There is an existing single-family story house right there. By pulling it back, it allowed us to get the stormwater planters along that area. It allowed a little bit more of a buffer between us and the neighbors, which I think is a positive thing. We also had a unit in this corner where it says amenity. We have taken, that would be the kind of the north end of the courtyard. We've taken that unit away so that the entire perimeter of the courtyard has active common spaces. So when you come off the elevators, there will be support services offices for residents, but the main community space and lounge, homework center, etc., would be in the center with doors out to the courtyard. We also have a kind of a centralized laundry, and it's large so that it can have table and seating so that you can wait while your laundry is being done. We'll also have windows so you can look out to the courtyard, and there's immediately adjacent to the door so you can go out in the courtyard while your laundry is being done. That extra amenity space is intended to be flexible to extend the usefulness of the outdoor courtyard, whether it's fitness or other kinds of flex space that is still to be programmed. But we think that helps quite a bit. So if we go to the next slide. So this shows kind of a blow up of the outdoor courtyard. What we've done is we've got larger planters along the eastern edge to create more of a buffer. Also, you will have views to the east over the rooftops, but the trees help frame those views and provide kind of a sense of enclosure for that. Against those planters for the trees, we have some seat walls and some built-in seating. We have outdoor cooking kind of in the middle island with a seat kind of raised planter. And then we have kind of open seating tables and benches so that people can configure the outdoor space for multiple uses. It also allows for multiple groups to be using the space at the same time without feeling like they're kind of infringing on somebody else's conversation. Go to the next slide. So a typical floor is this. 3-bedroom is at the corner of 37th Street and San Pablo. Really, the larger units we have to place where there are corners where we can have more glass. But then we have 1-bedrooms through the middle, and then we have studios kind of tucked into the knuckles and then along 37th Street. And that really provides the deepest affordability and will allow us to accommodate the most number of people and residents in this location. If we can continue up. And this just shows the section we have. I didn't talk too much about parking. We have 4 levels mechanized parking, so we've made it very efficient because we had the volume in the 2-level podium. We incorporated a pit to incorporate 4 levels of parking. That gives us about 37 spaces overall because we also have 3 accessible spaces by code adjacent to that. So you can see the 5 stories on top of that. Well, yeah, we can go. So there was a question about art. We know that the arts community is expressed everywhere in the city of Emeryville, and so we are hoping that this project can do the same. And we would imagine that once we get started working on it, we will be in touch with representatives in the community to start strategizing how best to incorporate the look and feel of the community in this building, whether it's a mural, whether it's some other application on the building, that is yet to be determined. We can go to the next. Right, so what we've done, however, was we've created these recessed areas within the facade that extend down to entryways at the ground level so that we can incorporate some bold expressions of color and pattern in those areas, and then looking at ways that those can be connected across the facade, both around the top, but then also on the first level above the retail area to kind of create a very dynamic, kind of fluid-like facade. You'll also see, as I think Navarre mentioned, we have increased the size of the windows, again, to create the feeling of more open space. I should say also, when we were looking at open space in the courtyard, we did expand the footprint to expand the courtyard. We also looked at other opportunities, whether like a roof terrace, but found that based on the experience that RCD has, you really don't want to create kind of open space that is not surveyed, that's kind of isolated from the other overall community, and it functions much better when we can have active spaces around it where there's more connectivity. And so, and it would also have displaced more residential units by trying to do so. So we go to the next. Again, at night, we think the pattern of windows on the upper floors is very interesting, and then we have a very transparent and glowing ground floor that feels warm and inviting for ECAP. Go to the next. And as was shown earlier, it's a four-sided building, essentially. All sides are incorporating the same elements so that it'll be pretty dynamic from every vantage point. Go to the next. And we've seen this one. This is what you will see pretty much from the highway, but also from the intersection of 36. I think there might be one more. Yes. So this shows a close-up of the building at night, where we're lighting up the facade, where we are incorporating artwork, kind of concealing the lighting so that it has kind of a glow. We are working with ECAP to plan their space specifically. Where we have solid elements, we're looking at creating more of a warmer texture, whether it's in board form concrete or wood materials, to give the whole facade a kind of a warm, welcoming appearance. So I think that's what we have.
Thank you for that presentation. I think that at this time, I want to ask the commissioners if they have questions regarding the presentation. Commissioner Kelly?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of rather simple ones, I think. The mailroom that you have set up there, is it going to be sufficient enough to provide package pickup, secure package pickup of some sort for the residents?
It will be, yes. We recognize that as a bigger and bigger element. It is big enough to accommodate all of that, yes.
Okay, okay. In our building, that's a very big problem, so it's something I'm pretty mindful of. And you're thinking of putting in refrigerators and freezers for the ECAP space. Have you thought of whether those would be able to be put on a backup system, or either an uninterrupted power supply or backup of some sort?
We haven't gotten to that
Okay.
the level of detail noting it.
I just
Yeah,
know
that's a
if
good
they have
consideration.
if we go through a public power shutdown and they lose freezers for 2 days, that's going to be a big, big loss for them. So
Yeah.
And then just a question I had, do you guys happen to know what their square footage that they're operating out of today is?
So in total, the site is about, I think, 4,800 square feet.
That's what they have now?
And that includes the area where they serve out front and like the kind of the parking area, as well as the indoor areas too.
Okay.
So it's pretty comparable.
I believe
Yeah,
that
indoors-
I believe the indoor space is around 2,000 square feet.
That's what I was thinking. The inside is pretty small. So inside they're getting a
Yeah.
lot more square footage with 38, 37. Okay, that's very good. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioner Chafee?
Thank you very much for the presentation. Just a few comments or questions rather. Is there a maximum number of residents that would be allowed per unit based on the number of rooms?
So yeah, those are set. I don't know. So the studios are, I believe, 1 to 2 people. The one beds are a little bit more. I don't know, Carolyn, if you know off the top of your head what this, but they are set. They do set the maximum and minimum number of residents for those bedroom sizes.
Okay, and then based on RCD's experience and other properties, do you have an approximate number of families or children that you would expect to be living in the facility?
Yeah, so in this project, because it has a limited number of 2s and 3 beds, it's mostly geared towards small families and individuals. So at this project, there are going to be very few families. Basically, there's a stack of 3s, and then I believe there are, Ron, either like 9 other 2 beds.
Yes.
So basically, about 14 to 15 families.
15 other 2 beds, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And then I guess 3 more things. So you mentioned a focus on supportive services, and I was just wondering if you could speak quickly to how the design reflects that aspect of the project, and what you've learned from your other properties and how that's reflected here.
Yeah, so I don't know, Navarre, if you're able to pull up the plans again or not. But with providing supportive services for formerly homeless households, we're finding that we actually need more and more space, more and more office space to meet with individuals and families. And so currently what we're providing are 2 offices, resident services offices, and I could anticipate that amenity space also being used, the amenity space for, smaller kind of meetings as additional kind of meeting space. So in this case, yeah, at 25% permanent supportive housing, I think this is about, what we see, as you increase to, 50% permanent supportive, we would definitely want to be adding more offices for sure.
Great. Okay. And then last 2 questions. One for bike parking. Have you considered electric outlets for electric bikes?
We have not looked at the overall electric, no, we have not, but we can easily accommodate that. It's just at a level of detail that we aren't at this moment, but that is becoming more and more of important.
Great. Okay. And then last question is around air quality. So I'm new to the commission. This is, I think, my 3rd meeting, so I didn't have the benefit of your previous presentations and discussion of air quality. But I was wondering if you're imagining the unit windows being operable and sort of how you're thinking about balancing air quality issues and heat issues and HVAC in general.
We are envisioning windows to be operable so that people can get fresh air. We do have to bring fresh air directly to mechanical systems within the building. And other than that, we have not looked at it in more detail at the moment. It's really more of a design development kind of thing, but we have designed it so that windows can be fully opened. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
I can add one thing to that. This is Carolyn at RCD. Just in terms of air quality, I mean, that's something that we're looking at more and more as the environment is changing, and also as energy codes are getting more stricter. We need to have much more sealed up buildings. And so definitely go through a pretty thorough design charrette with the engineering and architecture team to look at ways of bringing filtered air into all of the units, so that if residents did need to keep their windows closed, they can still get fresh and filtered air as an alternative. So we'll certainly be looking at that, especially with the proximity, close to the highway and things like that. We have to look pretty closely at making sure that folks can have good clean air inside if they are not able to open the windows.
Thanks.
Thanks. Are there other commissioner questions? Commissioner Mendez?
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I just have 3 kind of quick questions. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what's the difference between the function of the amenity space versus the function of the lounge? I just see the lounge is much larger than the amenity space, and I'm just wondering what's going to go in the lounge.
I can say a little bit about that. And I'm sure Nick and Carolyn can expand upon it. But typically in the lounge space, it's not what you usually think of in like market rate housing, where it's really kind of loungy. They put on a lot of programs in these communities for residents. So there's classes that happen there. There's homework that is done in there that is monitored. There is a lot of services and kind of enriching things, programs for residents that are offered utilizing that space. The other space has not been fully defined. We have talked about whether there's need for fitness on site or other kinds of just more program space. As Nick mentioned, with supportive services, there tends to be a growing need for additional kind of space to work with people in smaller settings. So it just provides that relief valve as opposed to having just the larger space.
Yeah, Ryan, I think that was a great overview. And then one thing I would add too is that, you know, the lounge space, I think, is an area for gathering. So people who want to have birthday celebrations or, you know, other celebrations in the building that kind of flow out also into the open space, that's typically where they would have them. So it's just an opportunity for residents to, given kind of the limitations of their unit sizes, to have larger gatherings in the building.
Okay. And then also, is this complex, are they considering allowing families with pets to rent these units? And if so, I'm just wondering, are any of the green spaces that are in the courtyard at level, or are they all raised planters?
That's a good question. I don't know our pet policy. I don't think typically we permit pets in the buildings.
Actually, yeah. I mean, we don't usually allow pets. However, there are definitely people that have companion pets for, you know, medical or supportive reasons. So we definitely have folks with pets, and so usually part of the design will try to find an area that could be, you know, designated for taking their pets out. So that, if that isn't something we've looked at, that's probably something we should just kind of design into the landscaping program.
Thank you. And then my last question is about the bike locker room. Are you considering adding maybe like a repair station, you know, where they could just fill up their tires or just do like really quick maintenance on their bikes?
Yeah, it's big enough. What we've done is we've allocated space, and it may not be shown on the plans, but there's room for a couple of bike stands, for repair stands, so you can put the bike on that, do work kind of on it all the way around it. So the thought was that would be more in the center of that. But the intent is programmatically, we agree that we need to accommodate that.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions from commissioners? Commissioner Guerrero?
Thank you, Chair Thompson. A couple questions. Thanks for the presentation, Ron and Nick. My questions relate to the families that might live there and how you would plan to accommodate like the children and in the building with the shared amenity spaces and your ideas with that.
Yeah, you know, so again, this isn't targeted probably to families. Some of our buildings do actually have like the play areas, such as our project in Oakland. So you know, I think that's a good question. You know, there may be the potential to maybe create some potential kind of play areas. You know, in the space. It is a pretty small space. But maybe the opportunity to maybe create different levels and things like that for play areas. Yeah, I don't know, Ron. I think that's something we can explore. You know, the potential to kind of create some kind of dual spaces that could be kind of play that have maybe softer surfaces, as well as could be, you know, seating areas as well for gathering. But yeah, we don't anticipate kind of a more kind of formal playground or anything like that, which typically we do include in our buildings that are targeted more toward families.
Thank you. My next question relates to the design and the palette of the facade. Do you have any more information that you can provide about the gray texture of the outside of the building?
Well, the anticipation is that it would be a plaster finish and kind of a smooth plaster finish for the gray. where the focus on more durable, if you will, materials such as concrete or kind of higher end materials is more in the pedestrian realm. But the idea would be to keep the building form fairly simple and smooth with plaster.
Thank you, Ron. And the windows. In terms of the site on the freeway, are there plans to have double pane windows to reduce the amount of noise for residents on that side?
Yeah, there'll be double pane windows throughout the whole project. And I would imagine we will have higher STC ratings where there's noise considerations as well.
My last question relates to the mix of the AMI units, and I was curious about the reason why you would not include medium income units.
Yeah, it really relates to the financing. So with tax credits now, you can include up to 80% AMI units, and as long as they average out to 60% with the extremely low and low income units, as long as they average out to 60%, you can still get tax credits. But the other state funding sources don't provide for financing for those units. And so, just given the rents, the rents are still not high enough to really, subsidize, those units and make them financially feasible, that really we need to draw from the subsidies. And so it is something we've looked at and we continue to kind of explore. But right now it's really challenging given the financing until there are more programs at the state level to provide financing for the moderate income units. It's really hard to make them pencil, especially now just given construction costs and kind of the escalation there as well.
Thanks, Nick. Those are all my questions, Chair Thompson.
Thanks, Chair Guerrero. Are there any additional questions? I have a couple, but want to make sure everyone else has asked the questions. Okay, I'll go ahead with mine. The one thing the fact that you are limited by the courtyard size is a significant component. It's also a waiver item. In terms of that sort of being a physical constraint, what's the thinking on how to balance access to outdoor space? Sort of how can you, do you have creative ideas about the fact that you won't be providing that additional physical space? Is there a concession or something additional that you're bringing to the project to accommodate for that reality? That'd be my first question.
Yeah, so open space in the common areas is something that we've been continuing to evaluate at our properties. And actually some of the feedback that we've gotten is that these are some of the most underutilized spaces in our projects that, really our residents aren't using, the open spaces and using even sometimes the community rooms and things like that. So it is something that we are, trying to balance, because there is such a great need for affordable housing right now. It's greater than ever. And, balancing, something that may be potentially underutilized versus trying to get, a couple more units in there, especially because it takes, more than 5 years to bring projects, to the market for lease. I think one piece was, as Ron had mentioned, was the amenity space. So converting one of the units to amenity space to provide for kind of, a little bit more kind of recreational space.
Yeah, and I guess this is also sort of just a fundamental question about what the courtyard does provide, is that it was a little hard to tell with the dimensioning and elements. I could tell that it was smaller, but I couldn't really tell in terms of the three-dimensional elements, sort of, what was not meeting the standard and what was. And so I don't know if you have a clear statement on that or a clear sense of the dimensional differences.
Ron, do you know the dimensions of the open space?
It's about 50 feet across. That I think it's just the biggest issue is just the overall total square footage. It's or 90 units, because with 90 units, I believe, because we aren't providing private open space, the requirement jumps up to 100 square feet per unit. So we would have to have 9,000 square feet of open space, and we have probably 1,500. I think Navarre had it in her.
That's right. That sounds right.
Yeah, there's just no way to provide that much. So we've got it as wide as we can at 50 feet across, which provides as much light and air coming in from the east, and given the depth from, it's an odd shaped site as a triangle. That's just all we could get.
Okay. No, thank you.
The one thing I could add to that too is I think what's really important is, because it's limited, is making sure it's really flexible, so that there's a lot of multiple uses that can be taken advantage of there. So like Nick was talking about with the community room, a lot of times we'll have it so that, we could have seating for a lot of people, could have seating for smaller groups. It's also great that we have kind of the two different community spaces inside. So, one could have exercise equipment or computers. And so, for example, we often will have some kind of computer classes or after school classes or exercise classes, but we usually focus on getting, using laptops or kind of portable exercise equipment or yoga mats or things like that, so that you can kind of use the same room in lots of different ways. And I think the same thing for the outside space, is trying to making it sort of multifunctional as much as possible, so that at different times of the day with different users, we can offer a lot with a small amount of space.
Okay, great. One additional question about the building facade design. You've had a lot of questions from the commissioners, but I wanted to ask specifically about the orientation and the differences in facade. The facade looks very uniform at this time. Given your project process, I know you mentioned design development. At what point would you be able to vary the facade, or will that not be feasible given this project? What's your sense of that?
Well, I think what the intent is to create a pretty smooth, modern facade that then can have recessed areas to incorporate kind of bolder expressions of art and not compete with that. And so it was intentionally kept fairly simple in that regard. There is a lot of detail in terms of construction joints and that sort of thing that is not yet shown, but the intent of like adding more materials or moving the building in and out is not something we're anticipating.
Okay, yeah, no, it was not actually related to massing or configuration. It was more related to the question around window sizes and shading, because you have different orientations to the side of the building. So that was the question. Those are all my questions. So thank you very much. And I think we're gonna move on to the public comment. And I have, go ahead, Commissioner Chafee.
Sorry, one more question. Could you speak quickly about the plans for the roof?
So there are currently no plans other than, the mechanical equipment, the potential to explore solar. I think the city maybe even has a solar requirement, things like that, but we don't anticipate any open space on the roof. So there wouldn't be any resident access up to the roof.
Charlie, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, if you're done with your Q&A, I just wanted to note for the record that Commissioner Sohane had to leave, and he departed the meeting at 7:17 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Is that your last question, Commissioner Chafee? Did you get your answer? Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any additional questions that have come up? Commissioner Keller? You're on mute.
I know I couldn't find my button. I was going to make this more as a statement, but maybe I'll ask a question. So, Ron, you had mentioned about thinking about another elevator and the staircase to access the the offices on the mezzanine level and
Yeah.
seeing that there's no residents on that floor other than the manager. And I'm thinking with card key security and the cameras and stuff, have you guys really thought that through, that you want to have 3 elevators to maintain and the cost to install that? It seems like you can make that corridor pretty secure. So I was looking for the kind of the reason that you want to go to the expense of adding another lift and another stairway.
Well, I can talk a little bit about that. No, the preference from a cost standpoint would be not to do that, and to do and so, as you mentioned, it can be done very securely, and because the workers at ECAP that would be utilizing that would have secure access, and that could be managed that way. The issue, however, I think is more of equity and providing equal facilitation. So unless we have the same functions on both floors, I think functionally it's going to work better for offices and for the manager, for instance, if his office is up in the mezzanine, to have quick access down to the main floor to address issues. Now, if you're providing that accommodation with a stair, and that person, even that person or somebody else may have some mobility issues that can't use that stair, then you're really creating a discriminatory situation for that person. Even though, yeah, that person could go around to an elevator around the corner, come back in and physically make it happen, it's not as direct and convenient. And so building code wise, I think we could not have it. In terms of ADA, I think it's problematic. And so I feel better that if we're going to do that we provide that equal facilitation. But that's kind of the way we're thinking about it.
I also think it's something that we'll likely be studying, just to kind of figure out what the best way to kind of handle the challenge. It may be that some of the spaces will get rearranged. So it's something that we're going to study and try to find the most cost-effective approach for that challenge.
Great, thank you. Is that the conclusion of questions? Any additional questions? Okay, all right. I'm going to move on to the public comment for this. Now is the time for public comment on this item. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to this item should have begun submittal of your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments into the record. If you are participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you are calling in, press *9 and the clerk will call you on at the appropriate time. At this time, I'll ask the city clerk whether any comments have been received via online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hand to make an audio comment. And I think we established at the beginning of the meeting there was a comment on this item.
There is, and I see that the commenter who submitted the card has now raised their hand, so I'm assuming that means they would like to make their own comment.
So there we go, okay.
And I will start the timer now. Go ahead.
My name is Mary Maltsby Jeffrey, Dr. Mary Maltsby Jeffrey, and I am a volunteer at ECAP. As you know, ECAP is the major food bank in the Bay Area, whose mission is to eliminate hunger. They serve over 300 families daily and have been doing so for almost 40 years. In addition to providing food for the less fortunate, ECAP distributes non-food donations to the needy from an off-site Oakland location. I am here tonight to ask for 2 things. First, I am concerned about the amount of space allocated for ECAP's use. As COVID-19 will continue to ravage our community, the need for food will continue to grow. ECAP already has difficulty storing the amounts of food they are currently receiving. I'm doubtful that the space being offered is adequate. Thus, I request that the city and RCI consider a plan that will allow growth of ECAP's facility as the needs of our community increase. My second request is for an apartment, a rental unit for ECAP in the new facility to serve several purposes. First, to provide housing for Miss Nellie Hannon, whose life has been dedicated to serving the residents of this county and beyond for nearly 40 years. Ms. Hannon's day starts at 6 a.m. Monday through Saturday and ends well beyond 8 p.m. most of the days. Her Sunday schedule is only a few hours shorter than the average 14-hour weekday schedule. An on-site apartment would reduce the number of hours added to her day by eliminating drive time and to and from work. Second, Mr. Bobby Miller, who is the CEO of ECAP, travels from his home in Vallejo 7 days a week to provide physical labor, manage the operations, provide administrative duties, pick up and delivery of product, and filling in wherever needed. His gruesome schedule mirrors that of Ms. Hannon's. Third, COVID-19 has taken a big toll on our local community, resulting in an increased volume of food pickups and distributions. This has increased the amount of work for both Mr. Miller and Ms. Hannon. Since ECAP is completely dependent on volunteers, there is never assurance that the demand for manpower will be met, thus resulting in increased hours of work for both of them. Fourth, there are many nights of the year when both ECAP agents are unable to leave the facility at a reasonable hour, thus resulting in one or both having to stay on site and sleeping in uncomfortable quarters and not getting proper rest. Finally, an on-site apartment would allow them to take a well-deserved break whenever necessary. Why should you provide this service, you might ask? For almost 40 years, Ms. Hannon has donated her time, her financial resources, and financial resources of her supported family members to provide needed services for the residents of Alameda County and beyond. If either of the cities benefiting from these services had employed someone to do just what Ms. Hannon has done, it would have cost well over $2 million if she had been paid at an average wage of $10 an hour. This does not include the cost of FICA, vacation pay, health and medical benefits, or 401k or other retirement plan. Additionally, a great majority of crime is committed in order to provide food for one's family. Robbery, theft, and shoplifting are crimes to provide food on the table for low or no income families. It is impossible to calculate the effect that ECAP has had on the reduction of these crimes, but surely one must recognize that it has resulted in tremendous money saved by businesses, city residents, and the city itself. Ms. Hannon's service to this community and city is worthy of this request. Not all cities are fortunate enough to provide for not only residents of their own city, but those of numerous others, thus providing a model for how cities should coexist and foster goodwill. Now, I am asking this request without Ms. Hannon or Mr. Bobby's knowledge. It's just something that I and several of the other volunteers at ECAP realize needs to happen. And I am willing to put myself out there to say that if the city is not willing to do this, or RCI, that I am willing, if we could dedicate at least one unit for this, a 2-bedroom unit for this purpose, I would put myself out there to find funding and do write grants so that we can accomplish this. But this is something that I would definitely request that you consider. And I'm passionate about it. So I'm passionate about writing the proposals to solicit funding to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Charlie, just a quick question for you about the timing. I know it's a little harder to do the 3 minutes on Zoom. Did we hear the conclusion of 3 minutes or not?
I believe the city clerk was timing her, and I thought I heard some kind of bell or something, but
There was a sound at 3 minutes.
Okay,
And
it's just more a logistical question, but I thought that comment was good, you know, so we're working out our processes. Are there additional comments?
I see no further hands, and I don't have any online speaker cards. Do you, Sherry?
no, I don't.
That appears to be all of the public comments.
Okay, great. I'd like to close the public comment at this time and then bring this item back to the commission for deliberation. So I'm going to actually just call on folks. Vice Chair Young.
Yes, hi. Thank you very much for a great presentation, and I really kind of enjoyed the development moving forward on the whole idea. We do have two questions that are up on the board. If you want to place them up there, the first question is, do we have an overall consensus that this is going in the right direction, and whether or not the commissioners are moving forward and satisfied with the direction that the design is taking? In answering those questions, I think there's a lot of really fantastic movement in the relationship between ECAP, the relationship between the residents, and the relationship between that retail space that's down there. And I know it's an extremely tricky spot. Triangles are really very hard to work with. I like the fact that the building went to a gray color. I think the scaling looks right for it, and I like the feeling of it on all four sides. It's kind of also a difficult thing to design a building from a couple different sides, and some of them are from the view that you don't see, which is on the back side. And I think it's I think that kind of plays for a very exciting and kind of a neat space that neat volume that looks good for the overall building. I really like the courtyard. When someone mentioned that there would be a multiple group could use it, couple groups at a time. I can't imagine more than two working there at the same time, hence its size, but it makes a lot of sense. It is a really good play. And I kind of now agree, because I think the last time when I brought this up, there was an idea of having a roof deck, and yeah, that would be kind of a cool idea, but I do understand the situation of it becoming what one might call it risky because they're so isolated. So I think unfortunate that we can't really take, but I can see that, the access to the stairs and the elevator has to play in there. You got all the egress issues, and I could see that kind of being a problem as well. But I think the view from the highway is also really kind of special. I think that's kind of a neat thing, and I think hopefully the play on the art on the buildings would look great day and night. So is the building? Am I satisfied as a commissioner in the direction of this project moving forward? I think it's really great. I do think that the responses raised on the first study really do play very well. And I want to thank you guys I know it's incredibly hard work. I also want to make one comment about the woman who spoke in terms of like an apartment building that might be dedicated. I don't know if this is something that is there, but I think she makes a lot of sense. I know we have some office space that could or could not overlook that retail spot. Maybe there's some office space that is for ECAP, and I don't know. There's something there that might be an option that might help someone in that sense. All right, those are my comments. I want to thank you very much for extremely wonderful design. I just love seeing the development. I think you guys are geniuses, so keep it up.
Thank you, Commissioner Young. Commissioner Mendez?
Thank you so much. And I'd like to thank the applicants also for the presentation. I also really enjoyed the direction that it's going in and your responses to our comments that we made the last meeting. I do have a couple of suggestions, comments mainly focused in like the courtyard area and the community space. So for the amenity space, I would like to encourage you to maybe make that a small gym, an area where the residents can go and work out, exercise. Living in an apartment complex myself that has a small gym, before COVID, it was being utilized all the time. And so that's kind of an amenity that I feel like anybody can use and appreciate it. So that would be my suggestion for that added amenity space. And then also to kind of help make the courtyard feel a little bit larger and maybe blend with the lounge, I would encourage you to maybe think about adding some kind of like sliding doors where you could open up the lounge into the courtyard. And so make it feel like more of a single space. I think you mentioned that the lounge could also be possibly used for larger gatherings. And I think also one thing that would encourage that would be to have like maybe a kitchenette area where if somebody did want to have like a gathering there for a birthday party, they could, have their food there, prep it, open up the space so that they could also use the courtyard. I just think it would be a much more pleasant area and space, and it would connect those two amenities together. And then my last comment would be that I would definitely try to incorporate an area for like pets, so that residents that do have pets have somewhere to kind of take them out into that courtyard and not have to go all the way downstairs out into the street to just walk their dogs or whatever other service pets that they might have. But other than that, I understand the restrictions and I understand the limitations of this project. And I do really appreciate you trying to do whatever you can to incorporate our comments on here. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Keller, do you have some comments?
Was that a rhetorical question? Do I have comments?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I do think that the project has come a long way and it is looking very good. I think we're very lucky to have a group like RCD working with this. They're successful at doing these. They know what they're doing. So I think once it's open, we're going to have a really well-managed facility. So a couple of my comments I will reiterate and go along with Commissioner Mendez. I think for the other space, a gym would be nice. I think of the spaces that are available in my building, and the one thing that is used probably most consistently, more than outside space, tennis courts, even the pool for my building, is the gym. And I think, a lot of people really are trying to get fit, and I think a lot of these people in this particular bracket might appreciate actually having their own space to do that in. So I would definitely support that idea. In the lounge, I agree that if you're going to have parties and other things, I think at least in there, if you have a counter and a sink for people to prep food and to clean up, you may not want a stove and possibly not a refrigerator because those become maintenance issues. But I definitely think a sink and some counter prep space would be nice for that. I want to appreciate the large windows. That was a comment I had made, and I think it's really key, especially if you don't have outdoor spaces, to have large opening windows. So I appreciate seeing those in there. In the plans, there are a couple visuals of bike racks, outdoor type of bike racks, and one was the typical hoop style, and then one was a kind of unusually shaped one that had a single anchor point. What I'd like to suggest is that you guys stay consistent with the city, either use the loop or the inverted U that have two anchor points to secure that rack. These that you showed were kind of good looking, but with the one anchor point, I just would be concerned about the security and longevity of those racks staying in place. So just look at that. And the other thing that kind of ties into what Commissioner Mendez was saying about the lounge, I think it might be good for you to look at for the laundry room. I think that the laundry room had a sliding door that opened right out to the lounge. People who were doing the laundry could go out in the courtyard, read a book. And I see the path of going out one door in the hallway and then out another door. But I also think the sliding door would help for ventilation. Those rooms can tend to get rather warm and humid. So I think if it had a sliding door that walked right out to that lounge courtyard area, it would be very, very beneficial. I appreciate that you guys looked at other options. From the standpoint where I live, I basically have outdoor space I can stand in and that's it. But from my fortunate point of view, I can see 3 outdoor spaces. The Emmy Apartments and the newly opened townhouses across from the park are now being occupied. And I don't see anyone using those spaces. I'm really the rooftop of Emmy is really kind of nice. They have an outdoor fire pit. And I really never see anyone out there. And I'm always so surprised at that. So when I think of projects like this, I think for this, what's more important is to provide people housing, especially if you're working so hard to give previously homeless people housing. So I think we need to keep in mind what we're trying to do is get people into homes. And they're probably less concerned about having outdoor space more so than indoors. So I think the balance here has to be struck with the size of the lot that we're working with, the fact that we need to put in a lot of housing here so that we can provide housing for people. So I think the balance that they've struck, I'm happy with, and I think they've made the best of it. And when the speaker, Mary, was speaking, as she was, I was looking at the ECAP space. And though I appreciate, that's kind of why I brought it up, is just to realize for myself that they are getting more interior space than they used to have, which is a plus. But having the city asking the project to underground facilities, so they had to put the transformer indoors, I just don't see where there can even be another foot. But if you guys can do something, I mean, you guys have worked miracles. I see the more space that ECAP can have, the better we're all going to be, and particularly the people who rely on that. But it's a pretty tight space. And as she was speaking, I was going, could you even push a wall here? Could you do this? And there is that storage space, but I'm sure that even ECAP needs secure storage. So what you could do, but I really appreciate the fact that you've gotten what you have for us. And I'm glad you did the darker color. I think that's going to be a little bit more durable next to the freeway and San Pablo Avenue. So those are my comments. I think you've done a really good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. Commissioner Guerrero.
Thank you. I'll start with the first question, the 2 questions that are here. I'm very happy with the direction that the project is going. And I'm generally satisfied with the responses to our feedback from the first session. So I'll just jump right into my feedback. I'd say that in terms of the AMI, I do have some concerns with, hello? All right. I have some concerns with with not including any medium income units, just citywide. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to introduce more of that stock in Emeryville, and it would diversify the overall type of units that are available for anybody who wants to move in. So still understand the limitations there, but in advocating for that medium income units in some capacity. I understanding that there may not be a lot of families that live here, I still think that there's an opportunity to accommodate some type of small play structure for children in the courtyard. Given that some of the residents may have grandchildren or younger family members that are visiting. And so I think it's really important to provide a safe space like that for younger children, being that there aren't a lot of parks nearby in the neighborhood. So in terms of incorporating a small play structure, I think that there's some opportunity for that. I agree with Commissioner Mendez on a few things here. So want to say that the fitness room for the amenities is the direction that I'd recommend also. Thinking about the additional costs for using any fitness or like a gym membership outside of home is very expensive. And so that would be an amenity that I think would go far ways for the income level of people that are living here. So they wouldn't have to pay an additional charge anywhere else to use a gym. So I think that is a good recommendation. The sliding doors, out to the courtyard and the kitchenette in the lounge area, I think are great recommendations. So I'm going to go ahead and say yes to those. The artist that you all shared with us, I'm partial to Joey Rose, and so I think that the mural that is on the Greenway there, that was recently introduced to our city, would be a really great artist to feature on a building like the one that you're working on. And so really advocating for Joey Rose to be an artist that you engage with on a really good level there. I agree with the colors of the facade. I think that like having the darker color there makes sense. I think the smooth surface would as well, but I agree with Commissioner or Chair Thompson that it's a little like it just feels like it's a lot of gray, and the question about texture was why I was asking them. Maybe there's a way to introduce some form of texture on the building, the gray parts of the building that are really subtle, and so there may be something to explore there. Those are all my pieces of feedback. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Commissioner Guerrero. Commissioner Chafee?
Great, thank you. Well, I'll echo the other commissioners in saying that I really enjoyed the presentation. I wasn't here for the earlier presentation, so can't really comment so much on the second question, except to say that it seems like everyone is satisfied, and I like what I saw and heard today. I think this is a really important project. I feel honored that we get to consider it within the city of Emeryville, especially with such a focus on formerly homeless individuals and families, and seeing the range of facilities that will be provided. Few comments. So I think that the city council brought up something about advocating for the building being 100% electric, and I would also like to echo that. I think that that would be a really great direction, and hopefully it will be feasible. In terms of the roof, I appreciate the comments that were made about security. One thought that I had that I don't know if has been brought up yet is to consider whether you could build it in a way that part of the roof might be designed to hold some sort of community gardening space that could be used in conjunction with ECAP as an educational space, or for food security and food education. So just something to consider. It wouldn't be open access, but limited access, maybe with a partner organization. I sit on the Parks and Recreation Committee, and so I'm acutely aware of how limited the open space in this part of Emeryville is. And I think that, you know, coming into reading about this project, I felt like it was a really big issue that there wasn't more open space available. I'm now convinced that I think, you know, the balance makes sense. I understand why the courtyard is restricted. I do think that there's still a need to try and squeeze every ounce of open space possible out of the project for the benefit of the residents. So, you know, things like potentially looking at creating parklets, taking over some of the parking spaces around outside, expanding the sidewalks as much as possible to provide areas for residents to seek haven outside of their place of residence, and then also be safe away from the street, even if it's not like a play area or something, and just expanding greenery as much as possible. And I know you're working on that. I think this overall puts even more pressure on the city of Emeryville to identify ways to increase open space and park space in the southern part of the city, because we will be adding so many new residents there. In terms of families, I echo many of the things that Commissioner Guerrero said. Even if it's a small number of families overall, those families and their children will need safe places to play and move about outside of their apartments, but inside their place of residence. I was glad to hear that some of the spaces might be open for homework and after school activities. I think that's important. One other thing to consider is, you know, how could a parent socialize or be outside of their apartment and have a place for their child nearby where they have a line of sight? So I think some of the rooms that are adjacent to the courtyard could lend themselves well to that, and maybe just build in that flexibility of having some, you know, small pieces of equipment or things available that would be useful for a range of ages. In terms of bike parking, the only thing I was thinking about is, you know, what if you have a bike that is large enough that it needs to go in the elevator to get up to the bike parking, but the elevator goes out of service? Is there a secondary way of moving in and out? I may not have read the designs closely enough, but it's sort of a contingency scenario, but just something to think about. And then if there is any sort of difficulty and restriction because of the parking location being on the upper floor there, you may want to think about whether there's an increased need for short-term parking outside, because people, if they're coming in and out of the building, might not want to go to the long-term parking. And I don't know how significant an issue that might be, but just something to bring up. On the courtyard, I like Commissioner Mendez's ideas of sliding doors in the kitchenette. One thing to consider as you're thinking about uses for the area is whether you could have some sort of a naturally inspired play area, which would be useful for all ages. So it doesn't need to be anything fancy, but just something that has like logs or stumps and greenery so that people can seek a place of refuge there and hang out with friends or watch their children, and potentially a little bit of topography if it's able to be built into it. I've noticed that at Christie Park, for example, the hills that they've built in there are really popular and just add a kind of playful layer to a space that, otherwise I think would be less exciting. And then let me see if I have anything else. Yeah, and just in terms of the art, I also agree that Joey Rose's style would be great. And maybe consider whether there could be some grants or other ways of incorporating public art, both inside in some of those spaces around the courtyard, for example, as well as on the outside of the building. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Chafee. So I'm the last commissioner to speak, I believe. So I'm going to have a couple comments now. I want to echo a lot of the same comments that my fellow commissioners have noted. So I think in general, to the big question, does the commission feel like this is going in the right direction? I think absolutely. This is a really important program to increase housing in the city of Emeryville and in the Bay Area generally. It's really important to have an affordability component. So overall, this is in the right direction. In addition to that, I really like the efforts that are being made. I would say continue those and go further with them. I think some of the things that you've heard tonight in terms of 100% electric, thinking about food security, thinking about fitness, understanding where kids might play, and then also a flexible indoor-outdoor sliding door environment. These are all really critical to livability. And so they're small touches, but they can be critical in terms of making this a really wonderful place to live. So I would encourage looking for those small moments to make this a place where people are really just want to live. And so I think that's really, really important. In terms of a couple other things I didn't hear mentioned, well, actually the color was mentioned. The only thing I would encourage on this is to maybe have a slightly warmer gray. I found the gray a little bit cold, and I know it can be a little bit sensitive to get the exact right palette. So I would be careful around those choices and the materiality there. I did hear in the presentation the idea of a visually permeable bike area. I like that idea for security, but also just for ease of use. And I also echo other commissioner comments around making sure that you can get bikes out, because it is a little unusual to have the bike room on the second floor, but certainly understand the constraints of the project. So I think, overall, I would say, keep going on this, keep making it a better project. I did want to address the public comment specifically around ECAP. I wanted to note that I did look at the timeline, and I really hope that COVID is not shaping our life in the same way in 2024 when this will come to construction. But keep it in mind, because there may be things that are important even in 2024. And I think there isn't a sympathy with a unit that would support the commercial user. And I wanted to encourage the applicant to consider how to make that happen, whether it's a first right of refusal or a grant funded situation or some other way to support that, because I think it really does, it does support live work, it does support you know, issues around working hard in a service position and not necessarily having affordable options in the area. So I'd encourage an investigation into that topic and see if there's an opportunity there. So I think those are my comments. I wanted to just open it one more time to the commission and see if any more comments have come up. Commissioner Keller?
Yeah, I just wanted, listening to Commissioner Chapey talk about the farm. Now I understand putting planting and stuff on the roof has a expense component to it. So I don't know what that does to your budget feasibility, but I think the idea of doing farming up there, that would be something that people were taken up, were escorted to. So it wasn't a place where it became a security issue. But I think one of the things I support is called the Homeless Garden Project, and it's out of Santa Cruz, and it teaches homeless people. They agreed to a 3-year program to do farming, and these people are very successful. The recidivity rate is below single digits. So I think this is really kind of important. And there is a building in Berkeley called Garden Village Apartments, and all of their rooftops are covered with this rooftop. It's called a rooftop farm, and I think the company that used to run it is Rooftop Farming. So if it's a viable possibility, they are on Fulton and Dwight, and I would maybe think, just touch base with them and see what the constraints and the cost of putting those on the roof would be. I think that's a very good use, gives people the opportunity to dig in the soil, and I think that would provide a lot of benefits for the residents and the people who attend or use ECAP. So that would be something possibly to look at. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Keller. Any additional comments from other commissioners? Okay, great. Charlie, I believe that this is a study session, does not require anything official.
That's right, and especially given the circumstances of this being an SB 35 project, the commission really has no purview over this project at all, other than the funding agreement that we have with RCD. I think it might be a good idea, though, to just, before you close the study session, to just check back with the applicant and see if they need any further direction, or if they're clear on everything, or have any other questions.
Sure. Ron, do you feel as though you've gotten the feedback that will help you move forward?
Yeah.
Or Nick?
I think so.
Yeah, I think that was great. I think we have everything we need.
Great, fantastic. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate all the great feedback.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. So at this time, I'd like to end this agenda item. Is that how we do it officially?
Sure.
Okay.
Close the study session.
Study session, closing the study session. Okay, and so moving through the agenda, the final thing I believe is commissioner comments. Anything to announce? Okay, great. And then officially I will adjourn the meeting at 8:38. Thank you, everyone.